Hello, and thank you so much for joining to learn more about our program economics platform. I'm Peter Starrett, a partner at Gray Associates and one of the builders of the system that we have to calculate and share program economics. Now, at Gray, we believe program evaluation should include internal and external data with the right people and process wrapped around it. That belief is depicted on our wheel shown here on the slide. Mission and academic standards include your internal data as well as certain judgments that may need to be factored in. And then we have money, which also comes from your internal data. The challenge here, however, is having the time and the right systems to be able to allocate to programs properly. This is where Gray comes in because we have the software to handle the amount of calculations that need to occur, and then the dashboards to analyze the results. The fourth and final piece, the markets for programs, includes external market data that we also have contained in our database. There's a separate video that you can watch where a couple of my colleagues walk through the market information included in our program evaluation system. Now, again, wrapped around all of this data should be the right people and the right process. For us, this is done in our workshops where we facilitate a process that includes key stakeholders making the right decisions on their academic programs. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be focusing specifically on our methodology for calculating the economics of programs, as well as the system that it sits in. There are many ways to correctly calculate program economics. To inform program decisions, we believe that direct variable margin is the right metric. It excludes departmental and institutional overheads because program decisions seldom change overhead. For example, colleges would seldom add a dean as a result of adding a program or growing a program. So what is direct variable margin? It is program-specific revenue minus direct instructional cost. To calculate program margin, we start with net revenue by student. Net revenue includes tuition plus per student state funding minus scholarships. We assign the net revenue to the courses taken by the student using the number of credit hours in the course. On the cost side, we start with the wages and benefits paid to the instructor. We include any special instructional pay, such as overload stipends. We also add any non-personnel costs for instruction, which gives us our total costs. We then allocate the total costs to the courses taught using the number of credit hours per course taught. The revenue and cost for the course then follow the student into their major. Importantly, a program includes all the courses taken by students in the major. So the English course taken by a nurse would be counted in the nursing major. So with that, I'm now going to jump into our program economics platform to show you an example of how this all comes together. The first tab you see here is our summary dashboard, which would show the overall economics for your institution, but in this video it is for a pretend sample institution. Now what you see is there are several KPIs across the top of the screen that shows you totals for key metrics for the most recent year, and then beside that, how that number compares to the prior year. It also shows our formula for getting to contribution. So we first have gross, the total gross revenue. Then we have the discounts, so gross minus discounts gives us our net revenue. And then we show the total instructional costs for, again, the most recent year. In this case, we have 2018. And finally, net revenue minus instructional costs gives us our contribution, the total for that particular year, which in this case we can see is down 1.3% compared to the prior year. Then beneath that, since we have 3 years of data, we show for the key metrics here of net revenue, instructional costs, and contribution, what the values were for each of those 3 years. This allows you to see the trend in particular for whatever years you have loaded up into the system. We typically start with 3, but we'll certainly add more as we update the system going forward. Finally, our charts at the bottom show our highest ranked items. So when looking at our rank for net revenue, for example, to the bottom left, we see the highest ranked program is the JD program. This same information is then shown for the instructional costs as well as the contribution. The other useful buttons we have in all of our tabs is the ability to choose different levels of aggregation, such as department, which you see here at the bottom of the screen, where I could toggle to show this for department, and now it shows the exact same information on the bottom of the chart here, except we've changed our level of aggregation. And we could go back to program as well. The other important toggle is at the top right of the screen here, where we currently have total selected. But this also allows us to toggle to see this per student credit hour. Again, these charts here, but it'll also be reflected in the KPIs at the top, as well as the trends charts you see here now. And it'll also be reflected through the other tabs in the system, allowing you to really standardize the numbers so that you can see on a per student credit hour basis now what the rank is for, in this case, our 10 highest ranked programs, as an example, on net revenue. And it's very easy then to toggle back to totals. Our next tab is the rank, which shows the same thing we saw on the bottom of our previous tab, but allows you to see the full list. There's also a tree map chart off to the right here that allows you to see how much of the total a particular program makes up. Here we see that the JD program, while we know it's ranked the highest in net revenue, it accounts for a huge portion of the overall net revenue at this institution. We can also drill down into other to start to see what the next group of programs looks like, just by clicking in this chart, clicking our checkbox, and it now zooms in the scroll chart on the left, the bar chart there, as well as our tree map chart on the right. So it's essentially eliminating that 15 or so programs at the top of the list to see what our next batch of programs looks like. We also have our different levels of aggregation, so we could view this by department or by course even. And we also have the ability to see this. We've got net revenue. We can look at contribution now. And it's still for that same list of programs. As you can see, I've got a portion of, or really all those others we had before, filtered in this particular chart. And it's very easy to just click that to remove it and go back now to our full list to see again, now we're still looking at contribution, where JD stacks up compared to all the other programs on contribution. Once you've found an area you want to drill down on, you can click on it here and go to the Scorecard tab. Let's choose psychology as an example. I can click on that in the chart to select it and then head over to the next tab. This now shows a waterfall chart to show the economics of the program from gross revenue down to contribution. So we see here this first blue bar is our gross revenue minus discounts, which gives us our net revenue, minus our instructional costs, giving us our contribution for, again, the psychology program. Beneath the bars, we have some calculations to show, as an example, what percentage discount is of gross. In this case, for the psychology program, students are discounted an average of 60% of what they were charged, which by definition means that net is 40% of gross. And then beneath that, we can see the percentile ranks for this particular program. This compares it to every other program offered at our sample institution. So gross revenue, for example, for psychology is in the 97th percentile, meaning that this total is higher than 97% of every other program offered at this sample institution. We also, I should mention while we're still on the waterfall here, have our toggle to see, like we are now, totals or per student credit hour. You'll see that while the totals are near the top of our percentile ranks for this particular program, the per student credit hour ranks are much closer to the median. So now gross revenue ranks in the 48th percentile when you view it per student credit hour, mainly because the total is so much higher because there's so many students in this particular program, driving the total to be near the top of the list in terms of our program ranks. We can also choose a year or semester on all of our tabs, which I should mention here. so that you could see specifically for 2018 now, what do the numbers look like, or we could even toggle between semesters as well. And then it's very easy to clear that and see again the total. Finally, the line charts along the bottom allow us to see the trend for the program so that it's all in one place. And this is also factors in, we can see it per student credit hour or the totals for the program, which then factors in how many students are actually in that particular program. The other tabs in the system allow you to do some initial analysis on the data. This next one includes a scatter plot, if I remove my selection, comparing revenue, cost, and contribution depending on what you toggle to, and compares that to student credit hours. We're always working with our clients to add more to the analysis, and we'll continue to enhance this tab by adding charts to the bottom or changing how we view the axis. So for example, I could switch to net revenue or switch back to contribution. It's also very interactive so that you can literally grab, or lasso as it's termed in here, to certain points. So if I click on this, I can literally now select all the programs that I want to visualize. So it allows me to drill down, drawing your own circle, which doesn't always look great. But you can now lasso around that group of programs and click the check mark, and it zooms in on the programs in that particular area. So while overall we saw the trend was clearly upward, now as we start to drill down on our smaller programs, and we could even drill down even further now as we're zooming in to select this group, and it keeps zooming in. And really what you're starting to see now is, while there is a clear trend, now there's somewhat more of a scatter, in that as we're looking at our smaller programs, while it is smaller programs that lose money, not all small programs lose money. We've got several programs here, as an example in this analysis, where they have the same number of student credit hours in them, but are very different in terms of the contribution. You've got some up here at the top, biology, studio art, several programs here at around 1,000 student credit hours that are, very positive in terms of contribution, around $300,000, versus a program with a similar number of credit hours, but technically negative. So it really allows you to drill down into the data more. Then the final tab is our data table, which is a self-build table that allows you to add and subtract columns based on how you want to aggregate the data and what metrics you want to see. So I can come in here and choose course department as an example, and even course code, and it adds those columns to the table, and then I can go and select the metrics that I want to be able to see. It could be students or revenue per student credit hour, and it's adding those columns to the table, which I can then click on to sort from high to low on any of these particular columns. You also have the ability to right-click and send this directly to Excel if there is any analysis or anywhere you wanted to save this outside. That wraps up our tour of the system, but before we end this video, again, I remind you that the economics is just one piece of our overall framework for evaluating programs. And ultimately, the decisions are your own. We provide the data and help facilitate the process, but your judgment and knowledge of the local area is key. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at help@grayassociates.com, and someone will follow up with you to answer your question or set up a call. And I thank you again for joining me on this video, and I hope we're able to connect in the near future.